She's still alive. Heads turned. Whispers rose in her wake. Who is that? That's the maid. What's she doing? Maya didn't hear them. She only saw the casket that held Mrs. Isabel Whitmore, her employer, her mentor, the only woman who had ever spoken to her like she was more than just the help. She had checked Isabel's body herself the night before, seen the faint tremor under the skin, felt the warmth that no dead body should have. She had recorded Naomi's whispered instructions to an unknown doctor, hidden the footage on the tiny USB now pressing into her skin. As the funeral director stepped forward with white gloves, ready to lower the lid, Maya's voice tore through the chapel like thunder. She's still alive. Her voice broke into sobs. She's alive, please don't bury her. If this moment took your breath away, if you believe Maya's courage deserves more than silence, drop a 1-inch the comments to show your support. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes that one voice can change everything. The room fell into an instant, stunned silence. Even the violinist froze mid-note, bow trembling in the air. Then the murmuring began. She's crying. What is she saying? Maya stumbled closer to the casket, tears streaming down her cheeks. She clutched the USB so tightly her knuckles went white. Please someone check her pulse again, she sobbed. I saw her breathing. Her chest moved, I swear it. She's been drugged, something that slows the heartbeat. It mimics death. 2 security guards began to move toward her. I'm not crazy, Maya shouted, her voice cracking, eyes red. You all think she's gone, but she's not. Don't let them bury her. Naomi Clark, Richard's personal assistant, shot to her feet in tailored black, her expression like ice. What on earth, get her out of here? She barked at the guards. Please, Maya cried, her knees buckling. She's alive. I can prove it. I have proof. She held up the USB like a talisman. Everything Naomi did, it's on here. The chapel erupted. Voices overlapped. What proof? She's lost her mind. What's going on? Richard's face had gone pale, then red. He stepped forward, voice booming over the noise. Enough. Maya, what is this? What are you talking about? Maya wiped her face with her sleeve, still sobbing. I recorded her. I recorded Naomi giving orders to inject a drug, to make Mrs. Whitmore look dead. I hid it. She shook the USB. Because she tried to take it from me. Please, check Mrs. Whitmore before it's too late. Naomi's lips pressed into a hard line. This is absurd. She's lying. She's clearly unstable. Remove her now. Oh, but Richard's hand shot up, trembling. Stop. His eyes were fixed on the USB. Give that to me. Maya took a halting step forward, still crying, and pressed the USB into his palm. It's all there, she whispered. Please, just check her pulse. A younger woman stepped forward from the mourners, her eyes wide. Wait, just wait. She wore a simple gray dress and carried a small device in her purse. I'm Lauren. Isabel's niece. I'm a nurse. Let me check. Just in case. Naomi snapped. This is ridiculous. But Richard's voice cracked, low and rough. Let her. Lauren approached the casket and gently placed the portable monitor on Isabel's wrist. The screen blinked once. Then again. Nothing. Then faint. A tremor. A whisper of life. She has a pulse, Lauren whispered. The room erupted into chaos. Richard staggered back as if struck. What do you mean? She's alive, Lauren said louder. Faint, but alive. We need an ambulance now. Maya's tears poured faster, her shoulders shaking with relief. I told you, she whispered to herself. I told you. Naomi's eyes darted, calculating, searching for control. It must be a malfunction. She was declared dead by a licensed physician. This is impossible. But the murmurs around the chapel grew louder. Questions, doubt, confusion. Richard's face had gone pale. He stared at the USB still clutched in his hand. Who checked her? Who pronounced her dead? His voice was no longer soft but rising like a wave. Whoever did this. His eyes blazed. His jaw trembled. Whoever did this will pay. Do you hear me? They will pay. The declaration cut through the noise like a blade. Naomi flinched, stepping back. Outside, the wail of an ambulance drew closer. Paramedics arrived moments later, rushing Isabel's barely breathing body out of the chapel. The casket rolled away, not into the ground, but into the back of a red and white ambulance van. Richard followed, USB still in his hand. Eyes wet now. He turned back once at the stunned mourners, his voice shaking but full of fury. "Whoever did this will answer for it. I swear it." Then he climbed into the ambulance beside his wife, his shoulders heaving as silent tears ran down his face. The doors slammed shut, the siren rose, and the vehicle sped away, leaving behind a chapel full of whispers and a single housemaid standing alone with tarot-streaked cheeks, knowing the truth had finally begun to breathe. The steady beeping of heart monitors filled the private recovery room at Street Helena Medical Center. Afternoon light spilled through half-drawn blinds, turning everything gold: the stainless steel railings, the white sheets, the pale hands of the woman lying on the bed. Isabel Whitmore's breathing had grown steadier with each passing hour. A faint pink had returned to her cheeks. For the first time since the chapel, Richard Whitmore allowed himself to exhale. He sat in a leather armchair at the bedside, shoulders hunched, his tie loosened. The USB drive Maya had given him lay on the table beside a half-finished cup of hospital coffee. He hadn't let it go since they arrived. Every now and then, his fingers closed over it as though it might vanish if he loosened his grip. 2 paramedics had just left. And now, only the soft hum of machines and the occasional shuffle of nurses remained. Richard glanced at Isabel. Her lips moved faintly as if she were dreaming. And then at the door. "Get her," he said quietly to his head of security. "Bring the maid, Maya Williams, now." Minutes later, Maya stepped into the room. Her uniform was still rumpled from the chaos at the chapel. Her eyes were red, but there was a steadiness in her walk now, as if speaking the truth had given her back her spine. She stopped just inside the doorway, clasping her hands together. Richard rose slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. His voice was low but sharp. "Close the door." The guard did so, and slipped out, leaving them alone. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was Isabel's breathing. Then Richard said, "Sit." It wasn't an order of anger, it was a demand for honesty. Maya perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, her palms flat on her knees. "Tell me everything," Richard said, his eyes locked on hers. "No more fragments, no more screaming. Start from the beginning." Maya swallowed. "Sir, Mr. Whitmore," her voice wavered, then steadied. "I didn't mean to disrupt the funeral, but if I hadn't, Mrs. Whitmore would have been buried alive." Richard's jaw clenched. He glanced at the USB. "I listened to part of this already," Naomi's voice, "but I want to hear it from you. What did she do?" Maya took a deep breath. 2 nights ago, Mrs. Whitmore collapsed. Naomi pushed everyone out and brought in a doctor I'd never seen before. 15 minutes later, he pronounced her dead. But that night, when everyone was asleep, I checked on her. She was still warm. Her chest moved. Barely. But it did. I saw a puncture mark on her wrist. She pressed her hands together. It wasn't death. It was something to make her look dead. Richard's knuckles whitened around the armrest. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "I tried," Maya said, her voice breaking. "Every time I went near your office, Naomi was there. She intercepted me. She told the staff I was unstable. Last night she searched my room. She was looking for this." Maya nodded toward the USB. "That's why I made copies. One in my locket, one hidden under the floorboard. This one I gave you." Richard picked up the drive, turning it over between his fingers. "And the recording?" "I recorded Naomi in the mortuary room." She said, 48 hours, it should be enough. Then we closed the chapter for good." Maya's hands shook. "She locked me in the basement wine cellar afterward. She said if I opened my mouth, no one would believe me anyway. If I hadn't escaped this morning," her voice caught, "if I hadn't escaped, Mrs. Whitmore would already be under the ground." Richard stared at her. For a moment, he looked older than his 45 years. The grief in his eyes had turned into something colder, heavier. He rose and walked to the window, staring out at the sunlit parking lot. Then he turned back. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked quietly. Maya lowered her gaze. "I know I've risked my job, maybe my life, but I couldn't let her die." Richard walked back to the table and plugged the USB into his laptop. The small speaker filled the room with Naomi's voice, hushed but unmistakable. 48 hours, it should be enough. Then we close the chapter for good." The words hung in the air like a blade. He played it twice, 3 times. Each time his jaw tightened a little more. "She locked you in the cellar," he repeated. "Yes," Maya whispered. "She wanted me out of the way until after the burial. She thought no one would listen to me. And maybe they wouldn't have. But Mrs. Whitmore." She glanced at the bed. "She gave me a chance when I first came here. She treated me like a person. I couldn't stand by and watch her be buried alive." Richard sat down heavily, running both hands over his face. When he dropped them, his eyes were wet. "I trusted Naomi," he said, almost to himself. "For years, she handled everything, and all this time," his voice broke. Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know what else to do." "No." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and stared at her. "You may have just saved my wife's life," he said softly. "And mine, too. Because if she had died that way—" He stopped, pressing a hand to his mouth. From the bed came a soft, weak sigh. Isabel shifted slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Richard was at her side in an instant, taking her hand. "I'm here, Izzy," he murmured. "I'm here." Her fingers moved faintly in his. Maya stood, unsure. "Should I go?" "No." Richard's voice was firm. "You stay. I want you here. When she wakes up, she'll know who saved her." He looked back at the USB again, his expression hardening. "Naomi did this," he said. "She thought she could take everything from me, from us." He rose slowly, still holding Isabel's hand. His voice was low but full of steel. "She will answer for it. I swear to you, Maya, she will." Maya swallowed, clutching her own hands together. Relief washed through her, but fear still lingered at the edges. "I'm just glad we were in time," she said softly. Richard nodded once. "So am I." He turned back to his wife, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "So am I." Back at the Whitmore estate, the air was changing. Naomi Clark sat alone in her office, a minimalist room filled with sharp edges and even sharper secrets. The curtains were drawn. Her laptop screen glowed softly in the dimness, displaying an encrypted folder she'd opened 100 times in the last 2 days. But this time, her fingers hovered, unsure. The funeral had not gone as planned, not even close. Isabel Whitmore was still alive, and Maya Williams had spoken. Naomi clenched her jaw, rising from the leather chair. She crossed the room in swift, calculated steps and stared out the window, her reflection darkened in the glass. The estate lawn stretched out before her, manicured, serene, perfect, but everything beneath it was unraveling. She had underestimated the maid. That was a mistake she didn't plan to make again. Back at Street Helena Medical, Isabel was still unconscious but stable. The doctors were optimistic, though cautious. Whatever had been injected into her system, a synthetic paralytic compound, had almost completely cleared, but the emotional toll would take far longer to fade. Richard hadn't left her side. He hadn't spoken to Naomi since the revelation. He didn't intend to. Instead, he had begun making quiet phone calls, to private investigators, to his legal team, to an old friend at the district attorney's office. Everything Naomi had ever touched was now under review. Maya had been given a guest room at the hospital. She hadn't asked for one, but Richard insisted. "You saved her," he told her. "You're not going back to being just staff again. Not in my house." She barely slept, despite the warm bed and the soft sheets. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that moment again, Naomi's face twisting in fury as she was dragged out of the chapel. The weight of the USB still seemed to burn in her pocket, though she no longer carried it. It had already been copied, stored, secured. But in her gut, she knew this wasn't over. The next morning, Richard sat across from Maya in a quiet hospital cafe. No tie, just a sweater and jeans. He looked like someone halfway between a grieving husband and a man preparing for war. "I need to know everything she said to you," Richard began. "Every word, every look, every threat. Nothing is too small." Maya nodded, setting down her tea. It started the day Mrs. Whitmore collapsed. Naomi told me to leave the room, said it was a private matter. I didn't think much of it at first, but later, when the doctor came, she made sure the rest of the staff stayed out of the hallway. She locked the door behind him. 15 minutes later, she came out and said Isabel was gone. Richard's face darkened, but he let her continue. That night, I saw Naomi again. She went into the mortuary room alone. I followed quietly and heard her on the phone. I recorded her saying something like, 48 hours should be enough. Then we closed the chapter for good. Maya hesitated. That's when I realized something was deeply wrong. I checked Mrs. Whitmore myself. She was still warm. I saw the tremor in her neck. Richard leaned forward. And Naomi found out? Maya nodded slowly. The next morning, I caught her in my room. She pretended she was checking on linens. But I knew. That night, I came back late from my break, and someone grabbed me near the basement door. It was dark, but I heard her voice. She said, "I told you to stay out of this." Then she shoved me into the cellar and locked it. "She locked you in?" he asked, voice rough with anger. For hours, I banged on the walls, screamed. No one came. I only got out because I found a loose pipe in the ceiling vent. I used it to pry the door open. I scraped my arm getting through. She pulled up her sleeve, slightly still bruised. I ran straight to the chapel. I didn't even change my clothes. Richard's hand curled into a fist. "She would have gone through with it," Maya whispered. "She would have let her die for real." The billionaire stood, pacing now, his fists clenching and unclenching. And for what? Power? My name? The company? He turned to face her, grief and fury blending in his expression. "Naomi's been by my side for 8 years. I trusted her more than I trusted most family. But I never saw it. Not until now," Maya said quietly. "Evil doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers and smiles." "May." Richard sat back down, rubbing his temples. "I have investigators combing through her emails. Her calls. I want to know who that doctor was. If he's real. If he's licensed. If not, God help him." He paused, then looked at her with gratitude softening the lines on his face. "You saved my wife. But you may have just saved me too." "I didn't do it for thanks," Maya said, her voice thick. "She gave me a job when no one else would. Treated me with kindness. I couldn't let her go out that way." "Oof." Richard nodded slowly. "Maya, you're not a maid anymore. You're family now." She blinked. "Sir, No, you earned that. No one's ever risked this much for us before." His voice softened. "And you were right. If you hadn't come forward, she'd be gone. And I'd never have known the truth." Just then, his phone buzzed. He glanced down. A message from the private investigator. "We found something. A bank account. Offshore. Linked to Naomi and a name. Dr. Evan Dale. License revoked 5 years ago for unethical practice." Richard's blood turned cold. He looked up at Maya. "We just got our first break." The sun had barely risen over the rolling hills of Napa Valley when Richard Whitmore stepped out of the hospital and into the cool morning air. He didn't bother with his driver today. Wasn't about appearances. Today was about answers. Maya stood near the curb, her jacket wrapped tightly around her. She looked up as Richard approached, eyes alert. "Is it true? About the doctor?" Richard nodded grimly. "His name is Dr. Evan Dale. Lost his medical license 5 years ago. The PI traced a wire transfer from one of my company's dormant accounts accessed through Naomi's credentials straight to an offshore account under Dale's alias. He was paid $200,000. Maya's stomach turned. So she bought him, paid him to mimic death, Richard said, his voice low, clipped, and he nearly succeeded. A black SUV pulled up. The investigator had arranged a meeting discreetly. Dale had resurfaced recently in a low-income clinic 2 counties over, working under a false name. Richard wasn't sure what he'd do when he found him, but he needed the truth straight from the man who'd nearly buried his wife alive. Maya hesitated before opening the passenger door. "You sure you want me to come? You're the reason we know any of this," Richard said firmly. and I don't trust anyone else right now. They drove in silence for over an hour, past vineyard estates and quiet rural towns. The address led them to a nondescript building behind a shuttered gas station, its faded sign reading, Community Health Resource. Inside, the waiting room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. A woman at the front desk looked up as they entered. Richard offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're here to see Dr. Bennett." It was the name Dale was using. The receptionist blinked, clearly uncertain. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Richard said, pulling out his wallet and laying down a crisp $500 bill, "but I'm sure he'll want to see me." 10 minutes later, a man appeared in the hallway. Mid-50 seconds, salt and pepper hair, a slight limp. His eyes scanned the room and froze when he saw Richard. Dr. Evan Dale turned to run. "Stop him," Maya shouted. Richard lunged forward just as the doctor reached the back door. The billionaire was faster than he looked. Grief and rage had given him strength. He slammed Dale against the exit, one hand gripping his collar. "You're not going anywhere." "I don't know what you think," Dale sputtered. "I think," Richard growled, "you helped my assistant fake my wife's death and nearly had her buried alive, and I think you're going to tell me why." They moved to a private exam room. Dale sat across from Richard and Maya, visibly sweating, his hands shaking. "Look," he began, voice hoarse. "I didn't know who she was. Naomi told me it was a mercy, a woman dying of late-stage heart failure who wanted to go peacefully. She paid up front, told me I'd never be found." Richard's fists tightened. "She said Isabel was in pain, that she wanted out of the public eye, out of hospitals. She made it sound like a final wish." "She lied," Maya snapped. "She locked Isabel away in her own home and planned to bury her alive." Dale looked at her, shame filling his pale eyes. "I realize that now." "You realized it after you cashed the check," Richard muttered. "I can help you," Dale said quickly. "Naomi was careful, but she made mistakes. She had burner phones. Kept some of the vials in her office, small fridge behind her bookshelves. I know because she had me test a batch there." Richard's eyes narrowed. "You went into my home? She said you were away on business." The betrayal sank deeper. Maya leaned in. "Is there any way we can prove what she gave Isabel?" Dale nodded. "There would still be trace amounts in her blood. It breaks down slowly. If you get a toxicology report now, it'll show up. It mimics cardiac arrest, but doesn't cause permanent damage, unless prolonged. Then you're coming with us," Richard said coldly. "You're going to give a full statement, and if you cooperate, maybe you'll only lose what's left of your dignity." Dale didn't argue. Back in the hospital, Richard wasted no time. He contacted his legal team, brought in law enforcement quietly, and requested an immediate toxicology report. Isabel was still unconscious, but stable. Maya never left her side. Later that evening, Richard stood in the hallway, arms crossed, as officers reviewed Dale's testimony. One detective, a no-nonsense woman named Detective Harris, approached him. "We've got enough to bring Naomi in," she said. "Attempted murder, medical fraud, conspiracy. And if the lab confirms what Dale said, it gets worse." "She's still in my house," Richard said bitterly. "Still walking the halls like nothing happened." Not for long. Richard looked through the window into Isabel's room, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. Maya sat by her side, reading softly from an old book of poetry Isabel loved. The light in the room felt warmer now, more real. "She almost took her from me," he whispered. Detective Harris nodded. "But thanks to your maid." "She's not just the maid," Richard interrupted, his voice firm. "She's the reason my wife is alive. And soon, she'll know exactly how much that means." As Harris walked away to organize the arrest, Richard stepped into Isabel's room. Maya looked up. "Everything okay?" He nodded. "They're going after her tonight, Naomi." Maya swallowed hard, relief and fear warring on her face. "Good. She won't hurt anyone again." He moved beside Isabel's bed and took her hand. Her eyelids fluttered, just faintly, but the fingers in his palm tightened ever so slightly. She was coming back, and when she did, the people who tried to silence her would have to face everything they ran from. Naomi Clark was on the phone, her tone crisp, her voice calm as ever. From the outside, it might have seemed like a normal day. She still wore her usual tailored suit, still walked the halls of the Whitmore estate like she owned them. But there was a tremor in her hand as she stirred sugar into her espresso. "Of course I've confirmed everything," she told the voice on the other end. "Mr. Whitmore is in the hospital with his wife. The estate is secure. There's nothing to worry about." She hung up, slowly. The truth was, everything wasn't secure. She'd felt it the moment Maya screamed in the chapel. Her plan had unraveled. The worst part? She didn't know how much they knew. Her burner phones were gone. Her laptop had been accessed. The account offshore emptied too late. And now, the household staff kept whispering when she passed. Richard hadn't answered her messages. Not one. Her fingers tapped against the marble kitchen counter. Faster now. Then she heard it 2 sharp knocks at the front door. Not the staff entrance. The main one. She turned, heels clicking against the tile. Her breath caught in her throat. Standing outside the tall glass doors were 2 officers, one in plain clothes, the other uniformed. Behind them, a black, unmarked vehicle idled by the curb. She froze. For the first time in years, Naomi Clark didn't know what to say. One of the officers, a black woman in her early 52s with a stern face and a badge clipped to her belt, raised a hand calmly. "Miss Clark," she called through the glass. "Detective Harris, we'd like to speak with you." Naomi straightened, smoothing her blazer. Her mind raced. Play it smart. Play it cold. Don't let them see you panic. She opened the door just wide enough to keep control. "I wasn't expecting visitors." The detective raised an eyebrow. "We're conducting an investigation. We have some questions regarding Mrs. Whitmore's recent medical emergency." Naomi gave a tight smile. "Mrs. Whitmore has passed." Detective Harris's eyes didn't budge. "Actually, she hasn't." The color drained from Naomi's face. I hadn't heard." "Let's take this inside," Harris said. "We have a warrant to search the premises, and we'd appreciate your cooperation." Naomi's gaze flicked behind them. No cameras. No crowd. She nodded once. Stepped aside. Inside, the uniformed officer moved swiftly toward Naomi's office. Harris stayed in the foyer, eyes on Naomi's every breath. "Where's your laptop, Miss Clark?" "In my study," she answered slowly. "Top drawer. Password protected. We already have a forensic tech unlocking it. Your devices were mirrored after Mr. Whitmore initiated a private security sweep." Naomi blinked. "That's illegal." Harris folded her arms. "Not when the devices belong to the Whitmore estate. Not when your access is under his name." Naomi stepped back, reaching for her phone. "I think I should call my lawyer." "You can," Harris nodded. "But first, you should know Dr. Evandale confessed, gave us a full statement, including your voice on record." Naomi's fingers went cold. "You'll be charged with conspiracy to commit murder, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted homicide. More may follow depending on what toxicology confirms." The air thickened. Naomi's mask cracked just slightly. She was dying anyway. "I just accelerated what was already inevitable. You tried to bury a woman alive, Miss Clark." There was no warmth in Harris's voice, only steel. Naomi didn't speak again. She held out her wrists. "I assume you're going to make a scene?" "We don't need to," Harris said, pulling out the cuffs. "You've already made it for yourself." As the front door opened and Naomi was led out into the fading sunset, the estate behind her seemed impossibly quiet. The sky glowed amber as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then the door shut. Back at the hospital, Richard stood just outside Isabel's room as the doctors read off her latest vitals. "She's stable," the nurse said, smiling. "Still unconscious, but she's showing signs of natural brain activity. Reflexes are improving. You might want to talk to her." Hearing the voice of a loved one often helps. Richard stepped in, his heart pounding. Maya was already seated at her side, gently adjusting Isabel's blanket. She looked up at him. "Naomi's gone," he said softly. "They arrested her an hour ago." Maya let out a quiet sigh of relief. Did she resist? She knew it was coming. She didn't run, but she was already sinking. They both looked at Isabel. Her breathing was slow, steady, She's coming back, Maya whispered. I can feel it. Richard stepped forward, took Isabel's hand in his. Hey, Izzy, he said, voice trembling. It's me. I'm here. Maya's here. You're safe now. Naomi can't hurt you anymore. A faint flicker passed through Isabel's brow. Then her fingers twitched. Richard leaned in. That's it. I'm right here. Her eyelids fluttered. Once, twice, then slowly opened. Richard let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. You're home, Izzy. You're home. Her lips moved, barely audible, but they moved. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She took Isabel's other hand gently. Yes, I'm here. She saved you, Richard said softly. She saved us both. Outside the window, the last light of day faded, but inside that room, something brighter had begun again. The following morning dawned heavy with fog. The vines outside the Whitmore estate were draped in silver mist, stretching like forgotten memories into the hills. But inside the grand mansion, the fog was not just weather, it was silence. An eerie, oppressive quiet had settled over the house since Naomi's arrest. The staff tiptoed. Conversations were whispered. No one dared ask questions out loud. But the truth lingered in every glance. The assistant they had once feared trusted was now gone, and the woman who had saved the family, the maid, was still here. In the kitchen, Maya stood at the long marble island, pouring coffee into a thermos. Her hands were steady now, but her heart wasn't. Not yet. She used to sit right there, Maya whispered, glancing at the corner stool. Every morning. 2 sugars. No milk. It wasn't Richard she was talking to, it was Isabel, still fresh in her mind even though she remained at the hospital. Maya's memory of her kindness, her gentle humor. The way she always said thank you, those echoes filled the empty kitchen louder than footsteps. Richard entered quietly, dressed in his usual sharp suit, though his tie was slightly off-center. He noticed the thermos in Maya's hand. You're still making it the way she likes it. Maya nodded. In case she asks for it, he smiled faintly. She will. MC. They stood for a moment in the kitchen's soft light, the quiet hum of the fridge the only sound between them. Then Richard said, I need your help again. Maya turned. With what? The estate, he said simply. Everything Naomi touched is being audited, her files, her decisions, and that includes how she treated the people here. I want to know who she silenced, who she threatened. I want to know everything. Maya hesitated. Some of the staff are scared. They won't talk to you. I know, he said, but they'll talk to you. She understood. She wasn't one of them, not one of the elites. Not someone who stood behind a desk barking orders. She'd scrubbed floors beside these people. She'd cried in the laundry room. She was one of them. I'll try, she said. By noon, Maya had spoken to 5 of the staff. What she heard chilled her. Naomi had made threats quietly. Not overtly, but enough to make people comply. The gardener had once been docked a week's pay for speaking out when Isabel fell down the stairs. The young sous chef had seen Naomi switch medication bottles and been told it was none of her business. A housekeeper who asked too many questions had been transferred without notice. It was control, masked as efficiency, but none of it had been questioned until now. Maya wrote everything down. She highlighted names, incidents, dates. She noticed a pattern. Naomi had systematically removed anyone who got close to Isabel. Personal staff were rotated often, private nurses reassigned. And Maya, who had lasted the longest, had only done so because she kept her head down, until she didn't. She brought the notes to Richard, who read them slowly in his home office, his jaw tightening with every page. How did I not see any of this? He muttered. You trusted her, Maya said. She made it easy. He looked up. You didn't trust her. Because she never saw me, Maya said quietly. Not really. I was just another uniform to her. But Mrs. Whitmore, she saw everyone. That's why Naomi hated her. Because Isabel noticed things. Richard leaned back, rubbing his temples. And that's what almost got her killed. There was a knock at the door. A young security staff member stepped in. Sir, Detective Harris is on the line. She says it's urgent. Medja. Richard picked up the phone on his desk, nodded once, then turned to Maya. You should hear this. He put the call on speaker. Mr. Whitmore, Harris's voice came through, calm and clipped. We've confirmed the toxicology report. Your wife was injected with a compound called zimotrelline. It was pulled from FDA trials a decade ago. Naomi and Dr. Dale had no legal access to it. And it caused the paralysis? Richard asked. Yes, it suppressed her neural activity and respiration just enough to mimic death. Another 2 hours. And the damage could have been permanent. Maya looked down at her hands, fighting the chill that rose in her chest. Also, Harris continued, we found Naomi's bank records. She had plans to leave the country. One-way ticket, booked to Dubai under a false name. She would have been gone by tonight. Richard's voice dropped. If we hadn't stopped her. She's not going anywhere now. We're pushing for no bail. Thank you, detective, he said, voice steady. When the call ended, he turned to Maya. You saved her just in time. I know, she whispered. But there's something else. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, one she hadn't shown anyone yet. It was something she'd found while cleaning Naomi's office before the police arrived. A letter, unfinished, torn at the edge, addressed to Mr. Whitmore, to be read upon my resignation. She handed it to him. He unfolded it slowly. By the time you read this, I will be long gone. I did what I had to do. Isabel was a threat to your legacy. You were too blind to see it. I protected the Whitmore name the only way I could. You may hate me now, but one day you'll understand that greatness demands sacrifice. No signature. Richard crushed the letter in his fist. She thought this was protection? He said bitterly. She thought she owned your family, Maya replied. He nodded. Not anymore. No. He looked at her for a long moment. I want you to come back to the estate. Not as staff. As a witness. As someone I trust. She blinked. What would I even be? He smiled softly. How about Director of Household Affairs? I need someone with a heart. Someone with eyes open. Maya swallowed. Are you sure? Absolutely. As she stood there, the sun finally began cutting through the fog outside, casting long beams of golden light across the hardwood floor. And for the first time, the Whitmore house didn't feel haunted. It felt like it might heal. The rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors had become a kind of music to Maya, steady, alive, patient. Isabel Whitmore had been silent for days, but the doctors had said her signs were promising. Stronger neural responses, muscle movement, dreams, even. And today, Maya felt something different in the air. Something close. She sat quietly at Isabel's bedside, holding the same thermos of coffee she always brought. 2 sugars, no milk, just how the lady of the house liked it. Maya glanced at the sunlight creeping in through the blinds. It was warm and golden, like something out of a memory. Then, a small sound broke the stillness. Maya? The voice was soft, cracked from disuse, but real. Maya bolted upright, nearly spilling the coffee. Her eyes filled with tears as she leaned in. Mrs. Whitmore? She whispered. Can you hear me? Isabel's eyes fluttered open slowly. Her pupils adjusted to the light. She blinked a few times, then fixed her gaze on Maya's face. You're here, Isabel said faintly, smiling. You didn't leave. Maya laughed through her tears. Of course I didn't. I told you I'd stay. Just then, the door opened, and Richard stepped in carrying a small bouquet of lilies. He paused mid-step when he saw Isabel's eyes open. Isabel? He whispered, breathless. She turned her head slowly, her smile widening. Richard. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and dropped to his knees beside her. You're awake. You're really awake. Her hand found his, weak but sure. You look terrible, she teased, her voice still raspy. He laughed, brushing a tear from his cheek. You have no idea what you've missed. I remember. The chapel, she murmured. Then, darkness. Maya touched her arm gently. You don't have to remember everything now. You just rest. No. Isabel's tone sharpened slightly. Something happened. Naomi, was she there? Richard and Maya exchanged a look. She was, Maya said quietly. She tried to make everyone believe you were gone, but I saw the truth. Isabel's face tensed. She did this to me, didn't she? Richard nodded. She and a disgraced doctor. They drugged you, faked your death, planned to bury you alive. Oh, Isabel closed her eyes for a moment, processing it. God. I always suspected she resented me. But this? She's in custody now, Richard said. Facing federal charges. She won't hurt you again. Isabel opened her eyes. You saved me? She asked, looking at Maya. Maya hesitated, then nodded. I just did what I knew was right. A slow, emotional silence filled the room. Then Isabel squeezed her hand weakly. Thank you, Maya. From my soul. Maya blinked back tears. You don't owe me anything. You were always kind to me when no one else was. I couldn't let that kindness vanish into the ground. Richard stood. The doctors said you'll recover fully. It'll take time. But they're amazed you pulled through. Isabel exhaled, a mixture of pain and relief. How long have I been out? 5 days, Richard said. But I've aged 5 years. She smiled again, more warmth returning to her face. And the estate? What's happened? We're rebuilding, Maya said. The staff is scared, but they're relieved. Naomi's reign of silence is over. And Maya's taken over the household, Richard added. Officially, I promoted her to Director of Household Affairs. Isabel turned her head slowly toward Maya. Well, it's about time someone with sense ran the place. They all laughed, a fragile but healing sound. A nurse stepped in quietly to check vitals, and Isabel drifted off again soon after. Her hand never left Richard's. That evening, back at the estate, Maya sat in the newly restored study, the same room where Naomi once kept her secrets. Now, it was filled with warmth, fresh flowers, sunlight, open windows. She organized staff schedules, meal plans, and wrote personal notes of thanks to each team member who had stood by through the chaos. Richard entered quietly. She's resting again. Doctors say her speech and memory are intact. Her sense of humor, too. Maya smiled. I noticed. He sat across from her. I want to hold a gathering. Here. For the entire staff. You'll lead it. They need to hear what really happened from someone they trust. Maya hesitated. You really think they'll listen to me? He nodded. They already are. She leaned back, folding her hands in her lap. It's strange. A week ago, I was scrubbing baseboards. Now I'm planning estate operations. Richard's voice softened. Because you didn't look away. You saw what no one else dared to. That takes courage. And leadership. She looked out the window. The vines shimmered in the setting Sunday. Naomi tried to erase a good woman for power. But kindness won. Richard nodded. And truth. There was a knock at the door. One of the housekeepers peeked in. Miss Williams, some of the kitchen staff would like to speak with you about the new meal rotation. Maya smiled, rising. I'll be right there. She turned to Richard before leaving. I won't let what she did define this house. I know, he said. That's why it's in your hands now. As she walked down the hallway, no longer unnoticed, no longer just the maid, Maya felt something she hadn't in a long time. Purpose. And somewhere in the hospital, a woman she once served was dreaming again. Of flowers, of laughter, of a second chance. The estate was alive again, not with celebration, but with the cautious energy of people learning how to breathe after holding it in for too long. The halls, once filled with quiet dread, now echoed with voices. Laughter returned to the staff kitchen. Windows that had stayed shut under Naomi's reign were now wide open, letting the October air drift freely through the rooms. But not everything healed at once. There were still whispers. Whispers about Naomi's deeper motives. Whispers about what she was really planning before Maya stopped her. And Maya had heard them all. That morning, she walked through the estate gardens, her clipboard in one hand, eyes scanning the grounds where the housekeeper, Nora, was overseeing new landscaping staff. Richard had ordered changes, wanted the entire property to feel new, like a physical break from the rot Naomi left behind. But Maya's thoughts were elsewhere. She always took her coffee alone, Nora said quietly, appearing beside her. Maya looked up. Naomi? Nora nodded. Every morning, she'd sit on the stone bench under the big cedar tree. I remember once I brought her the wrong kind hazelnut instead of French roast. She didn't say a word. Just stared at me until I apologized. I was afraid she'd fire me for a week. Maya didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced toward that cedar tree. The bench still stood there, empty, cold. She made us feel small, Maya murmured. But she was doing more than that. She was hiding something. Nora frowned. You mean the poisoning? No, Maya said slowly. Something else. Naomi didn't just want Isabel gone, she needed her gone, like she was protecting something bigger. Nora lowered her voice. Have you heard the rumors? Maya turned to her. Which ones? About the will. Maya froze. I heard Naomi tried to have it rewritten, Nora whispered, that she was pushing Richard to add new clauses, about control, about the estate. Maya's eyes narrowed. Who told you this? Nora hesitated. One of the old paralegals, left a few months ago, said Naomi had them draft 3 versions of a new will but none of them got signed. Isabel refused. Maya nodded slowly. Of course she did. Back in the main house, Maya found Richard in the library, thumbing through one of his wife's old journals. He looked up, surprised by the urgency in her eyes. I need to ask you something, she said without sitting. Of course. Did Naomi ever try to change Isabel's will? Richard's brows furrowed. We discussed estate planning a few years ago, but Isabel was firm. Nothing changed. Why? There's talk, Maya said, that Naomi drafted new versions, pressured staff, but Isabel resisted. Richard set the journal aside. That would explain why Naomi moved so quickly after Isabel collapsed. She must have thought Isabel wouldn't wake to contest anything. That I'd sign off on documents in grief. But you didn't, Maya said. I never got the chance. Naomi handled everything while I was out of state. She told me the legal documents were in order. I trusted her. Maya's voice softened. Naomi didn't just want power. She wanted permanence. Richard leaned back in the leather chair. And if Isabel had died when Naomi planned, we'd never have questioned it. Silence filled the room. Then Richard stood. I want you with me when I speak to Isabel's attorney. We're reopening the entire estate file. If Naomi forged anything, we'll know. That afternoon, the lawyer arrived, a kind, aging man named Gregory Pierce. He had served the Whitmore family for 3 decades and wore the weariness of that legacy on his shoulders. He sat across from Richard and Maya in the study, a thick binder in hand. There were 3 unsigned drafts in Naomi's file, he said without needing to be asked. 2 of them restructured estate control in the event of Isabel's death. One of them removed her charities from the inheritance entirely. Richard's jaw tightened. She was trying to erase Isabel's legacy. Maya spoke calmly. Did Isabel ever authorize any of these? Gregory shook his head. No. In fact, she asked me to put in writing that no changes should be made unless she initiated them. Maya frowned. Then Naomi forged the intent. Legally, that's fraud, Gregory said. And criminal, given the circumstances. Richard exhaled deeply. File the report. Every document Naomi touched, I want it reviewed. Every piece of mail. Every email. We leave nothing untouched. Gregory nodded and quietly left. Richard turned to Maya. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was theft. She was trying to steal Isabel's life. Maya stood slowly. She almost did. Later that night, Maya wandered the garden alone. The moonlight fell across the grounds like a soft blanket, and the wind carried the scent of lavender and cedar. She stopped beneath the old tree where Naomi once drank her coffee. In the soil below the bench, something glinted in the moonlight. She bent down, brushed back the dirt, and unearthed a small silver key. Her breath caught. It was engraved with one word: private. She held it up to the light. This wasn't over. There was more Naomi had hidden, more truths still buried in the ground. The key felt heavy in Maya's palm, though it couldn't have weighed more than an ounce. She turned it over under the moonlight again and again, tracing the small word etched into the silver: private. It didn't belong to any drawer or cabinet she'd ever opened in the estate, and she'd opened most of them. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, at dawn, Maya walked the house with quiet steps, testing the key in every lock she could remember. The wine cellar, the old armoire in the guest suite, even the basement file drawers. Nothing, until she reached Naomi's old office. The room had been sealed off since the investigation, but Richard had given her full access now. The air inside still smelled faintly of her perfume. Cold. Metallic. Maya moved toward the tall bookshelf behind the desk. Naomi used to stand here often, speaking on the phone with hushed venom, rearranging the volumes without reading them. Maya's fingers drifted along the edges until she felt it, a small groove behind the lowest shelf. She pressed it. Click. A narrow panel swung open, revealing a small steel door, almost flush with the wall. A lock was embedded in the center. Maya stared. The key slipped in like it had been waiting. When the lock turned, the air changed stale, untouched. She opened the door slowly. Inside was a hidden walk-in room no larger than a closet, its walls lined with shelves and boxes, a narrow desk on one end, and rows of carefully labeled folders. And in the center, under a spotlight, sat a leather-bound journal. Naomi's handwriting. Maya stepped inside. She pulled the journal down and opened the first page. The entries weren't diary style, they were calculated, meticulous. Notes, observations, targets. Entry 12. Isabel is still pushing for the Cancer Research Endowment. She doesn't understand how exposure to those labs could risk our patents. Entry 17. Staff rotations approved. Nurse number 3 has been reassigned. Too curious. Entry 22. Richard leaves Thursday. Ideal window. The final pages made Maya's stomach turn. Entry 39. Administer test dose of Zimotrelene. If no reaction within 6 minutes, increase dosage. Must mimic cardiac arrest with no immediate signs. Dale will confirm. Entry 41. Remove Maya before final phase. She's grown too observant. Basemont containment prepared. She nearly dropped the book. Naomi had documented everything. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous, it was engineered, calculated over weeks, months. Maya reached for a nearby box marked Personal, RW. Inside were forged signatures, drafted will copies, photos of Richard's private correspondence. She backed away slowly, heart racing. This was no longer about justice. This was about cover-up. 2 hours later, Richard stood over the table in Naomi's secret room, flipping through the evidence. His face grew paler with every page. She kept records of everything, he muttered. Why would she document this? Because she thought she'd get away with it, Maya said quietly. Or worse, because she thought she deserved to. He picked up one of the photos from the box. It showed him and Isabel at a charity gala from 2 years ago. There was a red circle drawn around Isabel's head. Maya leaned against the doorway. She wasn't just trying to kill your wife. She was trying to erase her from everything. Richard looked up. We need to give this to Harris. I agree, Maya said. But we also need to prepare the staff. If this gets out, the press will swarm the estate. The foundation, your company, they'll come with questions, cameras. I can handle the press, Richard said. But the staff, they trusted Naomi. Many of them were loyal to her. We'll need to explain carefully. She betrayed them too, Maya added. He nodded. Let's call a house meeting. Today. By mid-afternoon, the entire estate staff was gathered in the great hall. Gardeners, cooks, groundskeepers, and administrative aides. Maya stood at the front beside Richard, heart pounding. She hadn't spoken publicly like this before, but now wasn't the time to be quiet. Richard stepped forward first. His voice was calm but carried weight. You've all heard whispers, he began, and I believe you deserve the truth. Naomi Clark, our former executive assistant, is in police custody. She committed crimes against my wife, against this house, and against many of you. The staff stirred, but no one interrupted. She lied. She manipulated. She used her position to intimidate and isolate. Richard continued. And she almost took someone irreplaceable from us. Then he stepped back and motioned to Maya. Maya's eyes swept the room, faces she'd cleaned up after, cried beside, cooked for, and now she stood not as a maid, but as someone they needed to hear. I know what some of you are thinking, she said. That it's not our place to question what happens upstairs. That maybe it's safer to keep your head down. Murmurs of agreement. But let me tell you this, if I had kept quiet, Mrs. Whitmore would be buried right now. Silence. I saw something no one else saw. I spoke up. And yes, it almost cost me everything, but it also saved her life. A voice spoke from the back. You were always watching, Maya. You noticed things. Maya nodded. We all notice things. We all see when something feels wrong. We just need to believe our voice matters. She paused, then added, "If you saw something, heard something during Naomi's time here, speak now. You won't be punished. We need the truth." Another voice rose. "She threatened to fire me if I asked about Mrs. Whitmore's meds. I was told to throw out certain letters from her charities," said another. "I saw her in the library one night with a man I didn't recognize," said a third. Richard looked at Maya, his voice firm. "Record every detail. Every one of these voices matters now." That evening, Detective Harris returned. Maya handed her the journal, the key, and the full list of staff testimonies. "This," Harris said, thumbing through the evidence, "will bury Naomi in court." "Now," Maya exhaled, the weight of the day pressing against her ribs. "And Maya," Harris added, glancing up, "you did something extraordinary here. Don't let anyone reduce it to luck." Maya gave a small smile. "I won't." As Harris left, Richard walked Maya to the front steps. The sky was deep orange, the kind that came only after long storms. "You saved this house," he said softly. Maya looked out over the fields. "We all did. Together. Meh." And for the first time since this nightmare began, the Whitmore estate didn't just feel like a house. It felt like a home again. The day after the staff meeting, the estate hummed with a different rhythm, not fear, not caution, but purpose. People moved with confidence. Laughter returned in small doses, and greetings were warmer. Maya noticed these shifts as she passed through the halls. Handshakes held longer, nods more respectful. She no longer blended in. Now, she led, and today, she had one more duty that would cement the restoration of order. Down at the hospital, Isabel Whitmore was ready to be discharged. Her vitals were stable, speech returned to normal, and her memory thankfully intact. Richard insisted on being the one to bring her home, but it was Maya who had prepared the suite, overseeing every blanket, pillow, and vase of her favorite lilies. She instructed the kitchen staff on light meals and even made sure the bedroom had her favorite jazz records ready. By the time the black car pulled up in the driveway, the staff had lined the front entrance, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. Richard stepped out first, supporting his wife gently. Isabel wore a cream shawl and a soft scarf around her neck. Her steps were careful, but her presence was commanding. When she reached the top step, the staff applauded, gentle but heartfelt. A few of them had tears in their eyes. She looked at them all and said with a dry smile, "Did someone finally wash those windows?" Laughter rippled through the group. Then Isabel turned to Maya. "I hear you've been running the place." Maya dipped her head modestly. "I tried my best, ma'am." "No," Isabel said, stepping forward. "You were the best." "Dan." They embraced briefly, and Maya felt the fragile strength in the woman's arms. A survivor's strength. Later that afternoon, Isabel sat in the sunroom, sipping chamomile tea while Richard went through the latest estate reports. Maya entered quietly, holding a file. "We found something else," she said, "in the back of Naomi's journal. A legal document unsigned, undated, but dangerous." Richard opened the folder. It was another version of the will. This one wasn't just about money, it was about control. Naomi had drafted it to place the entire estate under a board of trustees, with herself as executor for life. She was going to push this after Isabel's death, Maya said. She would have frozen the assets, dismantled the charities, and diverted funds into shell companies, all hidden under the name of streamlining legacy. Isabel leaned forward. "That's not just betrayal, that's annihilation." Richard turned to her. "We have one final step to undo it. A new legal declaration, reinforcing your original wishes, signed by both of us." Isabel's eyes sparkled. "And let me guess, Maya's name is in it now, too?" Richard smiled. "It is, as Director of Household Affairs and Trustee of all internal operations." Isabel reached out and took Maya's hand. "Then let's sign it, right now." They gathered around the writing desk in the study. Isabel, Richard, Maya, and Gregory Pierce, the family attorney. As Isabel signed her name in neat cursive, she paused for a moment and glanced at Maya. "I want to leave a clause," she said. "Something personal." Gregory adjusted his glasses. "Go ahead, Mrs. Whitmore." Isabel turned to Maya. "In the event of my passing, I want Maya to retain control of the estate's community outreach programs. I want her judgment to guide where our money goes. She understands integrity." Maya's breath caught. "Mrs. Whitmore, Isabel shook her head. No, Mrs. You've earned your name here. From now on, you walk these halls as Maya William, trusted leader of the Whitmore legacy. Richard signed next. Then Maya, and with the final stroke of the pen, the house that once nearly fell into silence found its voice again. But peace never lingers forever. 2 days later, Detective Harris called with news that broke the surface of calm. Naomi's requesting a private meeting, Harris said on speaker in Richard's office. Richard's brow furrowed. With me? With both of you, Harris said. You and Maya. She claims she has information she's willing to exchange for leniency. Maya stiffened. What kind of information? She won't say over the phone, but it's about the estate. She said, and I quote, "There's one more truth they don't know." Richard leaned back slowly. And what's your recommendation, Detective? I can arrange for the meeting to take place at the station, under supervision. No deals unless you authorize them. But if she's holding back something critical, it's worth hearing. Maya looked at Richard. I'll go. If you will. He nodded. Let's hear what she has to say. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She walked the estate alone, past the gardens, the empty chapel, the cedar bench. Everything Naomi had tried to destroy had survived. But what if Naomi hadn't played all her cards? What if there was something left to unearth, something more dangerous than forged wills and secret drugs? As the wind rustled the trees and the estate lights flickered on the stone paths, Maya whispered to herself, one more truth. She didn't know what waited on the other side of that prison glass. But she knew one thing. She would face it with eyes wide open. The police station was colder than Maya expected, not just in temperature, but in tone. Sterile white lights buzzed overhead. The walls, lined with scuffed paint and old posters, reminded her of a place where hope was often worn down by routine. She walked beside Richard down a long corridor, each footstep echoing. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. A uniformed officer led them into an observation room separated by thick glass. On the other side sat Naomi Clark. She was no longer the polished woman who had strutted through the Whitmore estate in pencil skirts and pearls. Today, she wore a beige jumpsuit, her hair limp, her face pale, but her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, still held that glint of control. When she saw them, she smiled. Detective Harris stood near the corner. She requested only the two of you. I'll be in the hall monitoring audio. If she says anything threatening, the meeting ends. Maya nodded, though her stomach twisted. She'd dreamed of this moment, but now that it was real, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt unfinished. The door buzzed. They stepped into the interview room. Naomi didn't stand. She merely folded her hands. Well, look at you both. United. Cute. Richard took the seat across from her without blinking. Maya remained standing. What do you want? Richard asked. Naomi leaned back. To set the record straight. Maya crossed her arms. You mean, to save yourself? Oh. Naomi laughed, soft and bitter. Believe what you want, but I didn't come to beg. I came to warn. Richard narrowed his eyes. Warn us about what? Naomi tilted her head. You think I worked alone? That I masterminded all of this by myself? Please. You think I got my hands on an experimental drug by Googling how to fake a heart attack? Maya's voice was low. You had help. Yes, Naomi said, eyes sharp. And not from just anyone. Someone inside Whitmore Global. Note, Richard's blood ran cold. That's impossible. Our medical partnerships are strictly regulated. Naomi cut him off. You're not hearing me, Richard. This isn't about the company's ethics. It's about legacy. Some of your board members, your old guard, have been trying to push Isabel out for years. Quietly, carefully. I was just the one willing to get my hands dirty. Maya stepped forward. Names. Give us names. Naomi smirked. I give you names. You give me a deal. No. Richard slammed a palm on the table. You tried to bury my wife alive. You think you deserve leniency? Naomi didn't flinch. I think you need to know how deep this goes. Because if you don't, they'll come for you next. Silence filled the room like smoke. Maya broke it. Tell us what you know. Now. Or we walk. Naomi leaned forward, her voice low. Dr. Samuel Dale didn't bring me that drug from a university trial. He got it from a private lab funded through a dummy account routed through Whitmore Global's Health Innovations Division. That account traces back to someone named Peter Armand. He sits on your board. Richard's eyes narrowed. Peter's been with us for 20 years. He's family. Naomi smiled grimly. And he believes family ends at the boardroom door. He funded 2 trials in South America for memory suppression drugs. Unethical stuff. When Isabel wanted to audit the foundation's overseas medical donations, she got too close. That's when he came to me. Maya's throat tightened. You were supposed to silence her. I was told to protect the company, Naomi said. Everything else was just logistics. Richard's fist clenched. You make it sound like murder was a favor. Naomi's voice cooled. If you think this is over, you're wrong. Peter's still out there, still powerful, and if you expose him, you'll need proof. More than just my word. Maya leaned in. Do you have that proof? Naomi smiled, victorious. I kept a drive. Just in case. If I disappear in prison, or if someone cleans up my messes, that drive makes it to the press. Richard narrowed his eyes. Where is it? Naomi shrugged. That's the price of my cooperation. You make sure I don't rot in a cell until I'm 70. Get me protective custody. Minimum security. I handed over. Detective Harris re-entered at that moment, stepping beside Maya. I've heard enough, Harris said. We'll review your claim, Naomi. If the drive checks out, the DA might consider negotiations. Naomi leaned back, satisfied. Then we're done here. As Richard and Maya exited the room, Maya exhaled sharply. She's telling the truth, Maya whispered. I know, Richard said grimly. Peter's always been old school, but I never imagined. She said Isabel was getting too close, Maya interrupted. So they tried to erase her. They walked out into the sunlight. The station doors shut behind them with a heavy clang. Richard turned to Maya. We need to find that drive. Now. Before someone else does. Maya nodded. And we'll need help. The kind that doesn't wear suits or attend board meetings. Richard raised an eyebrow. You have someone in mind? She looked out toward the horizon. Yeah, a few people. The ones who've seen the dirty corners of this empire and never looked away. Back at the estate, the light flickered in the chapel, and deep within the mansion's rebuilt halls, echoes of unfinished war began to stir. The morning after the meeting with Naomi, the estate felt quieter than usual. Not in the peaceful, post-recovery kind of way, but the quiet that settles before a storm. Maya stood in the old chapel, staring at a stained glass window that shimmered in the early light. It was a depiction of Street Michael casting out the devil's sword in hand, gaze unwavering. For the first time in weeks, Maya wasn't thinking about Naomi. She was thinking about Peter Armand, a man who shook her hand 3 years ago in the estate's annual gala. He had smiled, called her young lady, and joked about how no one worked harder than the people behind the scenes. She remembered how cold his hand was, how empty his eyes felt behind his charm. Now, he was the real threat, not Naomi. She turned as Richard entered quietly, holding a slim leather envelope. The attorneys traced the dummy account, he said. Naomi wasn't lying. Peter funded a medical shell company in Belize. 2 trial labs registered under different names, but the trail leads back to him. Maya swallowed. So what now? He's not answering my calls, Richard said. Not that I expected him to. But if Naomi has that drive, and it really has what she says it does, emails, transaction logs, drug samples, we have leverage. Maya crossed her arms. You think she'd lie about the location? Richard gave her a tight smile. I think she'd only lie if she didn't have anything to lose. But Naomi still wants out. Which means that drive is real. They met with Detective Harris again that afternoon. Naomi, held in a more secure facility now, agreed to disclose the location but only with conditions in writing. She says the drive is hidden inside a vault, Harris said. Not a bank. A storage unit. Privately owned under an alias. She used an old alias from her grad school days. Carla Vane. Maya raised an eyebrow. Where is it? Harris sighed. Queens. Lower industrial zone. Old self-storage facility. Low security. No cameras inside the units. Richard frowned. So anyone could have gotten to it already. Unless she had it concealed, Maya said. She's careful. She wouldn't risk someone stumbling onto it. Then we go, Richard said. Tonight. They arrived at the facility after dark. The air smelled like wet concrete and rust. Rows of steel doors stretched in all directions like a warehouse graveyard. Harris had already secured a warrant. The facility manager, a sleepy man in his 60s, led them to Unit 214. Been untouched for over a year, he mumbled, unlocking the bolt. When the door slid open, it revealed a storage unit filled with filing boxes, an old desk, and a single tall cabinet with a mechanical keypad. Richard stepped inside slowly, scanning for traps or hidden cameras. Is this it? Maya asked. The officer checked the records. Naomi paid for this unit using prepaid accounts. No linked identity. Everything matches. Richard moved to the cabinet. A small hand-scrawled label on it read, Property of CV. He entered the code Naomi had given Detective Harris. The keypad blinked green. Click. Inside the cabinet were 6 thick binders, a sealed envelope, and a hard black case with a fingerprint scanner. Next to it, taped to the wall, was a photo of Isabel Whitmore from a charity event, circles and arrows drawn around her chest, with a sticky note that read, Phase 2. Maya felt her stomach turn. This is a hit list, she whispered. A corporate hit list. Harris opened the black case after scanning Naomi's fingerprint stored from evidence processing. Inside was a small metal USB, sealed in a padded slot, and a vial of pale yellow liquid marked ZTR-7, unregulated. This is it, Harris said. The drive. Maya took a breath. Let's get out of here, before someone knows we were here. Back at the estate, Gregory Pierce reviewed the contents of the drive with a team of forensic analysts. What they uncovered was worse than Maya feared. Dozens of encrypted emails between Peter Armand and Naomi. Lab reports detailing drug trials on unknowing patients overseas. Funds moved quietly from charity accounts into experimental projects. But one file stood out. A video clip. It showed Peter in a video conference with Naomi and a third man, Dr. Dale. Peter's voice rang through the speakers. Isabel's too involved. If she discovers the side effects, we lose the entire South American project. Naomi, she needs to be removed quietly. You understand me? Understood, Naomi replied. Dr. Dale hesitated. There are risks. She has family, connections. Peter cut in coldly. Then make it look natural. Cardiac. Stress. Whatever you need. But I want this over. Before Q4. Maya turned away from the screen, nausea rising in her chest. This is premeditated, Gregory said. Undeniable. You bring this to the DA. Peter Armand won't just lose his position, he'll go to prison for a long time. Richard nodded. And the foundation can be cleared. Isabel's name restored. Maya glanced at Richard. What about the press? They'll find out soon enough, he said. But first we go to Isabel. That night, Maya and Richard sat with Isabel on the sunroom couch. The lights were dim, the jazz playing low. Isabel watched the clip in silence, her face unreadable. When it ended, she simply whispered, Peter. Richard reached for her hand. He's finished. I promise you. But Isabel didn't speak for a long moment. Her eyes were distant, filled with something Maya hadn't seen in them before. Heartbreak. Not fear. Not shock. But the kind of betrayal that only comes from someone you once called family. Finally, she turned to Maya. You were the only one who saw through the noise, she said softly. You never stopped listening. Oh, I couldn't, Maya said. Not when the whole world was ready to bury you. Isabel smiled faintly. Then let's bury them instead with the truth. And so they would. The war wasn't over. But the ground had shifted. The truth was no longer hidden. And justice, quiet and unyielding, had begun to walk the halls of the Whitmore estate once more. The headlines broke at dawn. Whitmore board member implicated in international drug trial scandal. Inside the betrayal, emails, evidence, and the attempted erasure of Isabel Whitmore. Exclusive. Black maid turned whistleblower, exposes billionaire cover-up. By 8 a.m., reporters camped outside the Whitmore estate's wrought iron gates. Cameras flashed. Helicopters hovered. Maya watched it unfold from the second-floor window, the buzz of media frenzy vibrating through the walls. She sipped her coffee slowly, the bitter taste grounding her in a day she had long seen coming. Richard entered the room, suit perfectly pressed, but eyes weary. Peter's legal team is already trying to discredit Naomi, he said. Maya didn't flinch. They'll fail. The documents, the recordings, the vials, this isn't hearsay. It's a blueprint for destruction. He gave a slight nod. Isabel's statement goes live at noon. She wants to read it herself on camera. Live stream. Maya's brow lifted. She's ready for that? Richard looked out the window. She's been ready. She just needed her voice back. At noon, the world watched. From the grand sitting room of the Whitmore estate, Isabel Whitmore appeared on screen. No makeup, no dramatic lighting. Just her, seated beside Richard, with Maya standing silently behind the camera. Her presence felt even if unseen. Isabelle began. I was declared dead 2 weeks ago. That alone should make you pause. But what truly died that day was the illusion that power protects the innocent. She recounted her collapse, the false medical narrative, the isolation. She described Maya's actions, the evidence found, the betrayal within her own board. The drug used on me is illegal. The man who authorized its use sits at the helm of industries you trust. Let that settle in your heart. Then, with steel in her voice, we will not let wealth drown out truth. We will not let legacy be built on silence. I am alive and so is justice. The feed ended. The world roared. Within hours, 3 members of the Whitmore board resigned. Peter Armand's attorney issued a shaky denial. The foundation froze all global funding pending an audit. And Naomi's plea deal began moving through the DA's office, though public pressure made leniency unlikely. But behind the headlines, inside the estate, tension still simmered. Maya sat with Detective Harris in the estate library, surrounded by stacks of evidence, including digital forensics from the USB. There's one name Naomi mentioned offhand that keeps bothering me, Harris said, flipping through her notebook. She said someone in Belize managed the lab site. But we haven't found anyone matching that profile yet. Maya frowned. Did she give a name? Harris nodded. A woman, Claudia Reyes. Maya's heart skipped. Wait, I know that name. Harris looked up. She was listed as a consultant for the Children's Literacy Program. Isabel sent her personal donations. Monthly. I processed those letters myself. Naomi always insisted we handwrite the thank you notes. They stared at each other, realization sinking in. She used the charity pipeline, Harris muttered, fronting the trial funding as donations. Maya stood abruptly. We need to find Claudia. By evening, Maya and Harris were on a secure call with Belizean authorities. The clinic listed under Claudia Reyes' name had shuttered 6 months ago. Locals described mysterious medical teams, children being taken in for testing, and sudden disappearances. She disappeared right before Naomi's arrest, the officer said, but we believe she's still in Central America, off the grid. Maya leaned back, eyes closed. Naomi wasn't the only puppet. And Peter Armand? He was only the beginning. That night, as moonlight draped the estate in silver, Maya stood on the balcony outside her quarters. Below, the reporters had thinned. The world was still watching, but from a respectful distance now. Richard joined her, silent at first. Then he spoke. I never asked why you stayed. She turned to him. What do you mean? After Naomi locked you away, after what you saw, you could have walked. Gone to the press. Let someone else deal with the mess. Maya's gaze returned to the horizon, because she almost got away with it, because good people almost let her. Richard nodded slowly. And now? Now? Maya said softly. Now we finish what we started. He placed a hand on the railing. Peter's trial begins in 3 weeks. You'll be on the witness list. I'll be there, she said without hesitation. And Naomi? She'll talk. She's too proud not to. Richard turned to leave, then paused. My legal team. They're drafting something for you. It's not just honorary. I want you officially on the board. Full seat. Full vote. Maya blinked. Richard, you've earned it. This house, this family, it stands because of you. She didn't answer. Not yet. But deep in her heart, a sense of place of belonging was beginning to bloom. And that was something Naomi Clark could never steal. The first board meeting after the scandal was unlike any in the history of the Whitmore Foundation. Held in the estate's south wing conference room, an elegant space of dark mahogany panels and oil portraits, it was normally reserved for quiet discussions about endowments and gala planning. But today, the air was charged. Reporters swarmed the front gates. Armed security patrolled discreetly. And in the center of the room, Maya Williams sat at the long table for the first time, not as a maid, but as a board member. She wore a dark navy suit. Modest. Crisp. Her hair tied back. She didn't speak as the meeting began, though every eye, both friendly and cautious, kept glancing in her direction. Richard sat at the head of the table. "Before we begin," he said, "let's acknowledge what this institution has endured, and what it now must become. Betrayal tested our walls, but truth held them up." He turned to Maya, and one person made sure that truth was heard. There was a pause, then measured applause, some genuine, some polite. Maya simply nodded. The agenda moved quickly: Peter Armand's suspension, legal cooperation with the DA's office, and a full audit of all global charity accounts. The room buzzed with clipped legal terms and soft-spoken outrage. Then, toward the end, Richard raised a final item. "Maya Williams has accepted a formal invitation to join this board, not as a figurehead, but as a full voting trustee. Effective immediately." A man across the table, a longtime donor named Price, cleared his throat. "With respect, Richard, she lacks traditional credentials." "Credentials?" Richard echoed, leaning in slightly. "She stopped a murder, protected my wife, exposed corporate fraud, at the risk of her own life. That's more than any resume in this room." Silence. Maya looked at Price, her voice calm. "Mr. Price, I've ironed your shirts. I've cleaned up after your events. I've watched you slip donations to foundations you never asked about again. I know this place inside and out, and I stayed when others fled." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Price looked away. Another board member spoke up. "I vote yes." A second, then a third. The motion passed unanimous. And with that, Maya Williams became the first black woman and the first former staff member on the Whitmore board. Later that day, she walked the estate grounds alone, her heels clicking softly on the stone paths. The roses were in bloom. The gardeners, once hesitant around her, now offered respectful nods. She stopped near the East Garden fountain. Isabel sat there already, wrapped in a wool shawl, sipping ginger tea. "I watched the vote," Isabel said, smiling. "Well done." "It doesn't feel like winning," Maya replied. "That's because you're not finished yet," Isabel said. "Justice doesn't end with applause. It begins with accountability." Maya sat beside her. "I keep thinking about Claudia Reyes," she said. "About the children in those clinics. They didn't even know their names were being used to fund poison." Isabel nodded slowly. "Do you want to go there?" Maya looked up. "To Belize?" "Yes," Isabel said. "Audit it yourself. Talk to the people. Bring your truth to their doorstep." Richard had offered her power, but Isabel was offering her purpose. That night, Maya stood in her old room, the one tucked near the back stairwell. It still smelled faintly of pine and lavender. The closet held her old uniforms, pressed and folded. The bed, narrow and firm, was untouched. She sat on the edge and looked around. A part of her had wanted to stay here. It felt safer, quieter, but that part of her didn't exist anymore. A knock came at the door. It was Aaron, the estate's young butler in training. Kind, always awkward. He had once brought her tea during her first week's shaky hands, terrified of spilling it. You dropped this," he said, holding out a small bracelet. It was her mother's, a delicate chain she hadn't worn in weeks. She took it, surprised. "Thank you," he lingered. "Miss Maya, you think the rest of us have a chance now to matter?" She met his eyes. "You already do. You just need to speak when it counts." He nodded, slowly, and left. And for the first time, Maya felt the walls listening. 2 days later, she flew to Belize. The air was hot and wet, thick with distant salt. The village where Naomi's trial clinic once stood was small, 2 dirt roads, a faded schoolhouse, and a church with a broken bell. She visited the site of the shuttered clinic first. It was abandoned vines crawling over the walls, beds rusting in corners. But the damage lingered beyond the building. Locals told stories of sudden illnesses, memory lapses, and missing relatives. Some recognized Naomi's photo. One old woman spat on the ground when Maya showed it. She took notes, asked questions, recorded everything, and when she stood in the center of the clinic's main room, she pulled out her phone and recorded a message. This place was used to harm under the disguise of healing. But the world knows now, and it won't forget. She sent the clip to Isabel and Richard. Then she walked out into the sunlight, her face calm, her steps steady, because the journey to justice wasn't a single march. It was 1,000 quiet footsteps, taken even after the headlines faded, and Maya was still walking. The days in Belize passed like layers of heat, slow, heavy, and quietly revealing. Maya spent each one immersed in the stories of the villagers. Children who had once attended the wellness clinic now lived with headaches, trouble sleeping, and memory lapses. Parents spoke of strange injections, unmarked pills, and doctors who vanished after the clinic closed. Most didn't know what had been done to them, they only knew that something had. Maya sat with them under tin-roofed awnings and palm trees, scribbling notes in her leather-bound journal. She never rushed them. She didn't bring cameras or promises. She brought presents, and they gave her truth. One girl, 12, maybe offered her a bracelet made of shells. "You're the first person who asked what happened to us," the girl said, pressing it into Maya's palm. That night, Maya stood on the guest house balcony, the shell bracelet wrapped loosely around her wrist. The stars were so close here, closer than in New York, where the city lights always outshone the sky. She spoke softly, almost in prayer. "If I can give you your voice back," she whispered, "then I'll have earned mine." When she returned to New York 3 days later, the city was aflame with legal tremors. Peter Armand had been indicted. Wire fraud, medical conspiracy, attempted manslaughter, but he hadn't been arrested in the traditional sense. He had turned himself in calm, smug, with his silk tie and $5,000 watch surrounded by a team of attorneys and publicists. Cameras caught him smirking as he walked into the courthouse. Maya watched it on television from the Whitmore Library. "He still thinks he'll win," she said. Isabel sat beside her, sipping warm cider, because men like him don't understand losing. They only understand leverage. Richard entered moments later. "The trial begins in 10 days. Naomi will testify. Harris says we'll likely be called on the 2nd or 3rd day." Maya nodded. "I'll be ready." Richard sat across from her. "There's something else. A journalist, Gabriel Ruiz, wants to profile you. Not the scandal. You. He says America wants to meet the maid who saved the matriarch." Maya smiled faintly. "It's never just about the truth, is it? It's about who gets to tell it." Isabel leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time you told yours." Ugh. A week later, the interview aired on national television. It was quiet, tasteful, shot in black and white. Gabriel asked about her childhood in Charleston, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs. He asked how she ended up in the Whitmore household, what she saw the day Isabel was nearly buried alive, and how it felt to be believed after years of being invisible. But the moment that struck the nation was near the end. "When did you stop being afraid?" Gabriel asked her. Maya looked at him, eyes steady. "When I realized silence was worse than punishment. When I understood that truth doesn't always protect you, but it never betrays you." Social media lit up. Number, Maya William. Number, speak even if you shake. Number, not just a maid. But behind the scenes, something darker stirred. That evening, as Maya stepped into her car outside the studio, her driver handed her a plain envelope. "No return address," he said. Inside was a single photo, a picture of Maya in Belize taken from a distance. She was speaking to a woman near the old clinic. On the back, "Stay quiet. Not everyone likes heroes." Maya stared at it, her fingers tightening. She called Detective Harris immediately. "They're watching me," Maya said. "Whoever's left behind Peter isn't done yet," Harris replied. "They're trying to rattle you." "It's working," Maya admitted. "But it won't break you," Harris said. Later that night, Maya didn't go home. Instead, she walked to the estate chapel. She hadn't entered it since Isabel's near death. Now it was quiet. Candlelight flickered on the stained glass. She sat in the front pew, the shell bracelet still on her wrist. She didn't pray. She remembered Naomi's cold smile, the doctor's signature on falsified trials, Peter's smug dismissal. The little girl in Belize who had offered her a shell and a whisper of hope. Truth didn't rest, and neither would she. The next morning, she met with Gregory Pierce, the family attorney. "I want to start a fund," Maya said, "for victims of medical experimentation, especially in underserved communities." Gregory raised a brow. "A full nonprofit?" "Yes," she said. "Call it Echo. Because that's what they are, forgotten echoes. I want to make them loud again." Gregory nodded slowly. "I'll draw up the documents. You'll need board approval, but I doubt they'll refuse you now." Maya smiled. "Then let's make it official." By nightfall, the final trial schedule was released. Peter's defense would lean on organizational complexity and miscommunication. They would paint Naomi as a rogue actor. They would argue that Isabel's collapse was a tragic misdiagnosis. But Maya had the truth. The video, the vials, the voices, and she had something else they didn't. The people who now saw her not just as a maid, but as a mirror. Someone who had once been overlooked and who refused to let others be erased. The courthouse would be a battlefield, but Maya was already walking toward it. One step at a time. The courthouse steps had seen countless men in tailored suits walk up them, shoulders back, eyes forward, each believing the law bent for them. But this morning, the weight of something different pressed on the marble stairs. Justice had a name now, and her name was Maya William. She arrived flanked by Richard and Isabel, the three of them walking side by side past the media wall that buzzed with camera shutters and shouted questions. Maya's head was high, but her heart thudded like a drum in her chest. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Reporters filled every seat. The public gallery was a sea of tense faces, some supporters, some doubters, some just hungry for spectacle. Peter Armand sat at the defense table, calm, immaculate, a silk tie, a soft smirk, a notebook he barely opened. His attorneys, 5 in total, whispered in measured tones, confident in their choreography. The prosecution, led by ADA Simone Vargas, opened swiftly. "This case," she began, voice crisp, "is about a man who believed his legacy was worth more than a human life, who conspired to silence a woman because she was asking too many questions, who used science not to heal but to hide." "May," gasps echoed when the first exhibit came on screen, the hidden video recording Naomi had given them, with Peter's voice cold and clear. "She's getting too close. Handle it." Maya was called on the second day. She stepped to the witness stand in a dark blazer, hair pulled into a modest twist, eyes steady. She swore her oath with a calm voice that echoed in the chamber. Vargas approached. "Miss William, please describe your role in the Whitmore household." "I was a housemaid," Maya said, "for nearly 5 years." "Were you present the day Mrs. Whitmore was declared deceased?" "Yes," Maya replied. "And I was the one who realized she wasn't." A ripple moved through the gallery. Vargas led her gently. The discovery, the signs of life, the confrontation with Naomi, the imprisonment in the basement, the USB drive, the flight to Belize. Maya answered every question without flinching. Then came the defense. A tall man named Caro stood, pacing slowly, his voice calm and condescending. "Miss William, you are not a doctor, correct?" "No," Maya replied evenly. "Not trained in medicine, pharmacology, cardiology?" "No." "Yet you believed based on intuition alone that a woman pronounced dead was, in fact, alive?" Maya looked him in the eye. "Yes, because I listened. Something none of you did." The gallery stirred. Caro pressed on. "Isn't it possible your emotions clouded your judgment, that your attachment to the family influenced your assumptions?" Maya leaned forward slightly. "What influenced me was seeing a woman's hand twitch when it wasn't supposed to. What influenced me was hearing her whisper when everyone else had written her off." The defense faltered. The judge called a recess. Outside the courtroom, cameras swarmed Maya again. One journalist called out, "Maya, what's justice to you?" She paused, looked straight at the camera. "Justice," she said, "is when silence no longer protects the powerful." Naomi testified next, shackled, guarded, yet almost theatrical in her delivery. "They wanted her out," she said of Peter. "He was scared Isabel would uncover the trials. She was auditing foreign donations, getting close. He asked me to distract her. When that didn't work, he asked me to remove her." "Why did you do it?" Vargas asked. Naomi hesitated. Then, because I was tired of being invisible too, and he offered me a seat at the table. Maya sat in the gallery, feeling the ache of that truth. Betrayal often wore familiar faces. The final week of testimony brought forensic analysts, financial experts, even former employees of the Belize lab. The evidence was irrefutable. Funds were laundered, drugs untested, children used. Isabel nearly murdered. Peter never took the stand. His lawyers claimed health reasons. But everyone knew cowards don't defend in daylight. On the last day, Vargas gave her closing. Peter Armand is not the villain of a spy movie. He's worse. Because he looks like someone you'd trust. A mentor. A philanthropist. A legacy builder. But underneath the silk and charm is a man who saw human life as disposable. She paused, turning toward the jury, and he would have gotten away with it if not for the woman who refused to look away. All eyes shifted to Maya. Tears welled, but she held firm, because she wasn't crying for herself. She was crying for everyone who'd been buried in silence. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, the room stilled. The foreperson stood. We find the defendant, Peter Armand, guilty on all counts. There was no applause, no gasps, just a quiet exhale. Justice had spoken. Peter's smirk disappeared for the first time. His jaw clenched. He was led away. No longer the empire's architect, just another man who believed the rules didn't apply to him. Outside, the sky had turned golden. Maya stood on the courthouse steps once again, this time surrounded by survivors. People from Belize. Families of those harmed. Isabel. Richard. Harris. She didn't make a speech. She didn't need to. She simply raised her hand and pressed her palm to her heart. A gesture of witness. A promise to remember. And all around her, others did the same. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a choice made over and over, even when no one clapped, even when no one watched. The following morning, the Whitmore estate felt different. Not louder or busier, just lighter. As if a storm had finally passed and left behind clean air and new ground. Maya stood in the kitchen with a warm cup of chamomile tea, watching the staff move around her. Where once there had been glances laced with pity or quiet deference, now there were smiles, nods, respect without reservation. She didn't wear the uniform anymore. She didn't need to. The trial had ended, but the work had just begun. A new world had cracked open and Maya intended to step fully into it. Later that day, Richard met her in the estate study. He wore a gray vest and shirt sleeves rolled up, looking every bit the legacy man rebuilding his empire from scratch. I've already spoken to the board, he said. The Echo Fund will launch next month, starting with a $5 million grant from the foundation. You'll be the director, full autonomy. Maya blinked. That's more than I expected. It's not charity, Richard said, voice firm. It's overdue justice. You're not a symbol. You're the architect now. She smiled. Then I better build something that lasts. He leaned forward. And there's one more thing. We've set up a scholarship in your name. For girls like you. From places like you. To study law, medicine, ethics, whatever they choose. Her breath caught. Why me? Because you didn't just survive this, Richard said. You rewrote the rules. That afternoon, Maya visited Isabel in the solarium. The older woman was slowly regaining her strength each day, a bit more color, a bit more command. Do you know what Peter told me once? Isabel said, gazing out at the garden. He said a house was only as strong as its silence. Oh, Maya frowned. Silence? He meant control, Isabel clarified. Secrets, obedience, polished lies. She turned toward Maya, eyes sharper than ever. But he was wrong. A house is only as strong as its truth. And it took a woman from outside these walls to teach me that. Maya looked down, a little embarrassed. I just didn't want to bury the wrong person. Isabel laughed a real, heartfelt sound. You didn't. You resurrected the right one. Mend. They shared a quiet moment, the weight of the past few weeks suspended in the sunlight between them. The first press conference for the Echo Fund was held in the atrium of a renovated community center in Brooklyn, a space chosen deliberately, far from the marble of Manhattan. Maya stepped up to the podium. No teleprompter, no designer gown, just her voice. This fund isn't just about money, she began. It's about acknowledgement, about saying to the voiceless, we hear you now, and we won't forget you. Reporters jotted notes, but more importantly, survivors nodded. Sometimes, Maya continued, justice doesn't roar, it whispers. In courtrooms, in basements, in back alleys and broken clinics. But when enough of us whisper together, truth becomes thunder. She stepped down to a standing ovation. But what mattered more was the little girl in the front row, about 8 years old, who ran up to hand her a drawing afterward. It was a sketch of a woman in a cape. Mama says you're the real kind of superhero, the girl said. Maya knelt down. So are you. Never forget that. That evening, Maya returned to her apartment, small, quiet, untouched since the chaos began. She lit a candle, opened the window, and sat down with her journal. She wrote, truth is not a weapon, it's a light. It doesn't blind. It reveals, even in the hands of the forgotten. She closed the book and exhaled. This was not the end. Justice wasn't a destination, it was a direction. And she would keep walking it, not because it was easy, but because silence had no place in the world she was helping to build. The Echo Fund headquarters opened on a warm Saturday morning in a red brick building on Malcolm Avenue. It used to be an abandoned community library, left to rot after the city pulled funding nearly a decade ago. Now, the walls were repainted, the windows let in sunlight, and the sign above the entrance bore a single name in modest lettering: the Echo Center for Justice, Memory, and Healing. Inside, staff buzzed with excitement. Young interns, seasoned social workers, medical consultants, and human rights lawyers all gathered under one mission: to amplify the voices that had been ignored. And at the heart of it all was Maya William. She moved through the halls that morning with quiet purpose. Everyone greeted her with a smile. Some called her Miss William. A few still said, Maya. But what mattered was that no one called her just anything anymore. She was no longer just a maid. She was a voice, a presence, a force. That afternoon, Maya returned to the Whitmore estate one last time. Not for work, not for trial prep, but to say goodbye. She found Isabel in the garden, pruning roses with careful hands. The late autumn wind rustled through the hedges, whispering against the stone walls. You're leaving, Isabel said without looking up. Maya smiled. The center's open. I'm needed there full time. My apartment is 10 minutes away. Isabel set down her shears and stood, her balance more stable now. I always thought of this house as permanent, Isabel said, as if these walls could hold everything forever. But you taught me. Homes don't protect people. People protect people. Maya walked closer. You were never the enemy. You just didn't see what the house had become. I see now, Isabel whispered. They hugged, a long, silent moment between two women who had once lived on opposite sides of power and who now shared something stronger: truth. Richard was waiting by the front gate. He looked tired, but lighter, like a man who had begun to forgive himself. I won't say goodbye, he said, handing her a folded envelope. What is it? Maya asked. A letter, for the board, making your position permanent. With veto power, you may leave the house, but your voice stays in the room. Maya held the envelope carefully. Thank you. I should be thanking you, Richard said. You didn't just save Isabel. You saved me from becoming the kind of man who forgets what love costs. She offered him a soft smile. You remembered just in time. He nodded, then took a step back. Go. Build what you came here to build. No. And with that, she left the Whitmore estate for good. Weeks passed, then months. The Echo Fund flourished. Children from Belize were flown in for real medical treatment, pro bono. Investigations launched into experimental clinics across Africa, Asia, and South America. Maya spoke at town halls and congressional panels. She was offered book deals, documentaries, magazine covers, but she turned most of them down. Her story wasn't meant for fame. It was meant for change. One night, after another long day, Maya stood alone in the Echo Center's main hall. Lights dimmed, the room quiet. A plaque had just been mounted on the wall, beneath a photograph of a girl from the Belize clinic holding a toy stethoscope. It read, Justice doesn't whisper forever. One day, it finds a voice loud enough to be heard. Maya William. She stared at it, humbled and stunned. She never expected her name on a wall. She never asked for it. She only asked to be seen. Behind her, the door opened. It was Aaron, the young butler from the Whitmore house. He wore a visitor's badge and carried a clipboard. "I brought over the files you asked for," he said, "from the Naomi audit." Maya took the clipboard and smiled. "Thanks for making the trip." He hesitated. "It's funny. I used to serve dinner in a house full of people who never listened. And now, I work for a woman who built a house just to listen." She chuckled, gently patting his shoulder. "Stick around. We're just getting started." That night, as she walked home beneath the quiet city lights, Maya passed by a church. Inside, a choir practiced. The music floated through the open doors like warmth. She paused, not to pray, not to cry, but to listen, to the echoes, to the voices that had once been buried, and now lived again, because the world had changed, not through war, not through vengeance, but through one woman's choice to speak when no one else would. Her name was Maya William. She had been underestimated, dismissed, silenced, and still she spoke. And because of that, 1,000 others would now find the courage to do the same. The light that had once flickered in a dark chapel, it stayed, it spread, and in its glow, the forgotten were finally seen. The lesson from Maya Williams' journey is clear and deeply human. Courage doesn't always look like grand gestures. It often begins with a quiet voice refusing to accept a lie. In a world where the powerful often silence the truth, it takes relentless integrity and compassion to protect it. Maya taught us that justice isn't reserved for the loudest or the wealthiest, but for those willing to risk everything to do what's right. Her story is a reminder that one brave person, armed with truth and conviction, can light a path for countless others who've been left in the dark.